Hello, and welcome to the Joel Wolfe Podcast. There are some big topics facing us today, whether it's parenting, relationships, or questions about where we came from and who God is. Why don't we tackle them together? We're so glad you're with us. Let's get started.
I want to tell you a statistic that will hopefully give you hope. Because the last thing I want you to do is to get all, under it of I am a failure, what am I doing, this is hard work, and da-da-da-da. I don't want you to get under that. There is a massive statistic out there that says that adult children are the product of 30% parenting and 70% their own personal choices. So remember that perfect child that we're aiming for that does well in love and work? You have 30% input. They have 70% ability to choose. So that kind of takes the pressure off a little bit. I don't know about you. When I read that, I'm like, oh, thank Jesus in heaven, I don't have to do this perfect. And that there is a lot of grace out there. But you know what? I've really determined that I'm going to give my best 30% in there and hopefully encourage them and push them towards good. But you need to understand that your kids all have a free will and they get to pick. So no matter how, you can have amazing, amazing parents that have children that have issues just because that's their bent and their choice and where they've gone. So you can't judge another person and you can't judge yourself too harshly, okay? So everybody say, deep breath. It's going to be okay. And realize, too, that there's definitely personal choices that they can have. Amen? So and the other thing, too, is, we're doing our best, right? We are doing our best, and even if you can pick up a new tool here or there, or, somewhere else, or as you go along, you are already way ahead of the game. So just feel good about yourself. Now, how do you like that for some self-esteem? Feel good. You all get a participation award. You came. No, this is really huge. Okay, so let's talk about the IY generation. You took your books. Let me see that just really quick to show it. I read this book and I got through about the first 2 chapters. I texted Kiri, I hate this book. I said, don't do this to me ever again, because actually it was quite sad. It was very, very frustrating to me to read, but yet it was very, very enlightening. So what the IY generation is, as I kind of alluded to last week, was, and this is by Tim Elmore, if you're interested. It was written in 2010, so it's about 6 years old, so some of the statistics are going to be a little bit skewed. But what the deal is the Y generation runs, I think, from 15 through 30 or 35 right now. That's the Y generation. They can get these fun names for the generations. Yeah, before that, is your question, what's the generation before that?
Well, I thought it was Generation X.
Generation X runs 36 to 51-year-olds. Generation Y are the 16 to 35ers. And what they do with the IY generation is a subset of that generation, if you want to know. And it runs about 15 to 25, I guess. So the 15-year-olds to the 25-year-olds. And they've got a lot of statistics and a lot of research on that. Now, the younger children, the ones under 15, there's not a bunch of research out yet. So those children, those ones that you probably are raising, there isn't a whole lot of information on them quite yet. But what we can do is what generations do is they take the issues of their previous generation, and then there's a few little nuances that get added in there. So the description here of this generation, it's actually a really, by the time you get to the end of the book, you're back to thinking God is good and on the throne. But prior to that, it's a little scary. So the reason I'm bringing these out to you is the last thing I want to do is depress you, but what I want to do is make you aware. Because what happens in the generations in the public square does not have to happen in your home. Remember, I told you, you are so in charge of your living room. You are so in charge of your living room. And your kids don't have to take on what the public square takes on. They have to take on what's in your living room. And so I want you to be aware of what's out there. It's crazy. I don't know about you, but, I always used to think I was really young and in. I was hip. I was so hip. And then all of a sudden, I was not hip in the blink of an eye. I had no idea what was going on. I didn't know, I remember we were doing a Halloween trunk or treat, and these little kids are coming through dressed up with all their, their superheroes. I didn't know who in the world they were. What are you? I'm me. And I'm like, what is that? And apparently that's the new thing now. What happened to Superman? I don't know. But now it's, what is it now? I don't know. Huh? Well, no, there's other. They were weird. I don't know maybe they're just watching really weird TVs. I don't know. Anyway, the point is that it's really easy for us to get out of it and not know what's going on out there. So I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of the IY generation. And that if you have kids that are teenagers or young adults, they're in the midst of this. If you have kids that are coming up, they are saturated in this plus whatever is the new nuance, okay? So let's get started. Number one, a couple of things. And like I said, this is not in your notes, so you're just going to have to find a blank piece of paper to write on, okay? So, you got yours, so you're all ready to go. Number one, they are an overwhelmed generation. The IY generation, 15 to 26, they are overwhelmed. There's a lot of pressure on them to perform. These are what you call the trophy kids. What it does is it's caused these kids, they have become so busy. We are so good at busying up our kids' situation. One day, long ago, we used to come home from school and eat our cookie and go outside and play. And that was pretty much it. And we would go and build a fort, and we would do this, and we would do that, and come home, eat dinner, do our homework, whatever was there, and go to bed. That's used to be how life flowed. And nowadays, it is so packed. We have a tendency to pack because we as parents, we want our kids to excel. We want them to be good at everything. Let's try ballet. Let's do this, 15 sports. We have a tendency to fill our children's schedule up very, very huge. And our own schedule can get very, very busy and sped up. And so that's the ditch that this generation is running in. And so do we want to, pull them out and not give them any opportunities? No. That's another ditch. But what we want to do is hit the middle of the road. We want to hit somewhere in the middle. So these children right now, they are overwhelmed. They have much to do and not much to do it in. And so this is a consideration that we have to think about as we're considering our parenting styles. Can you, as you're, and when you get multiple children, it gets more and more complicated and all that kind of thing, but could you maybe possibly be okay with them being home a couple of nights a week? Is that a possibility? Is it a possibility for them to not have to go somewhere? And that's going to require us to have self-control because we have a tendency to live our life through our children. So we have to be careful that we value, just to be able to pull us out of that ditch, we have to value boring. We have to value just being home. We have to value just quiet. And that's a hard thing because we love to be busy too. There's, obviously sitting in this room, there's those, some of you are like, I do not like busy. I sit at my home and I am quiet. I don't have a problem with that. But, sometimes we do have a problem with that. So that they're overwhelmed. Number two, they have a tendency to be overconnected. They have constant noise going. They need noise. They need to be busy. They need to be talking to 15 kids at once. I don't know about you, but when I came home, I love sounding like a dinosaur. When I came home from school, we had the phone that was connected on the wall with the little squiggly cord, and my mom bought a really long one so we could walk around the house and get tangled up into everything. Yeah, we did. But I came home, and as soon as I left the school, I didn't know what my friends were doing. So you know what I would do? I lived in a neighborhood. We were in the house, and there was all these houses around. I would go out and climb up in this tree, this cherry tree and I would look and see who was playing where. And I'd look and they're all over at Ruthie's. Mom, can I go to Ruthie's? Everybody's over at Ruthie's. So then I'd run over and I'd find the group. That's how I found my group. But nowadays, the IY generation are 24/7 connected, having text messages with 15 kids at any given time. They're twittering. I know of a family whose one of their children, a middle schooler, has 15,000 followers on his Twitter. So they're like connected, overly connected. Okay, so when you have that much connection, where do you have your space? If you have that much conversation going on all the time, where's your quiet? Right? So they're overly connected. Their screens become, under overly connected, their screens become their relationships, and they are really good at having a relationship over a screen, but they have a very hard time having a relationship with a person. And those of us who are parenting these kids, we have to teach them, and this is something you want to write down, we have to teach them that their screens are for information, not emotion. Emotion needs to be communicated face to face. And this is something we have to start practicing as well. Pick up the phone, get together for coffee and break up. Don't break up over the phone or, on a text message. Or if you're struggling with somebody, don't confront them on a text message. Talk to them, right? So this is where a lot of difficulty is happening with our kids, is that they're becoming emotionally unintelligent because they can't have a heart-to-heart conversation, eye-to-eye. They're doing it on their screens. And that's difficult. Number 3, so they're overwhelmed, overconnected. Number 3 is overprotected. I was talking to you a little bit about, the advent of all these seatbelts and helmets and all of that kind of thing, which is fantastic. Let's decrease the amount of brain damage when a child has a car wreck or, a bike wreck. But what also, the downside of this is that we are so overprotecting our children, so padding them that they aren't doing anything. They're afraid. We're raising up a very fearful generation, and that's not good for them. I would rather have a brave, trailblazer whip out the sword and go for it and maybe get cut and fall a couple of times than a afraid person. Now, this is something I'm going to talk to the women in this room. You are raising boys. You can't raise them telling them always to be careful. Please be careful to not tell them to be careful all the time. If you are constantly living in a world of caution instead of a world of advancement and bravery, it's going to be a very difficult place for that young man. And men are born, bred, and hormonalized to go out there and kill and slay. To go out there and adventure, to jump over those, whatevers, and jump and climb and swing, because they have to be the ones that are going to be our protectors in the future. They have to be the ones that are, but if mommies are trying to, and I'm going to be very, very kind of a little bit in your face, if we try to feminize our boys especially, and try to detune them away from the very way that they're wired, and we're always cautioned, be careful, oh, don't, I don't want to, we are going to raise boys that do not, they're going to have this testosterone flowing in their blood, but yet they are not going to be confident to go out and do the very thing that God has wired them to be. So, raising boys is huge. The boys of the IY generation are the most vulnerable, because everything in society is taking maleness and feminizing it. Everything takes maleness and puts it down. Everything is taking maleness and turning it around. And if you have boys in your home, I want you to look at them. Those are dragon slayers. Those guys are the guys that you're raising up. Who's the guy? A Braveheart. Who is that fella? Whoever he was. You know what I'm talking about? The gladiators. You're the ones raising these guys up. You have to raise them very differently and very cross-grained to what the whole society is doing. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you some more about boys in just a minute, but let's get through this. So overprotected, the seatbelts, the helmets, don't go outside, you're going to get stolen, you're going to get you're going to get, it was so hard. Where we live, you can ride your bicycle through Bradley Lake and over to 7-Eleven, and there was the summer, I always knew it was coming because it started off with the first one, when my kid would say, I'm bored, and I would say to myself, I think it's time. Honey, why don't you get on your bike and ride over to 7-Eleven? Would you let your kids ride over to 7-Eleven? It's about 1.5 miles without you.
You have to let go.
Oh. How would you say yes to that? How would you let them do that? Maybe they went with somebody older. Okay, but I wanted them to do it. So there came that time, and I said, okay, I think you're ready. You're going to ride to 7-Eleven. You know, you can go get a Slurpee. It's $1.50. I think I paid for that first one. So he went and, he got my $1.50 or whatever. I said, go buy a Slurpee. And I had to make it cool, and I couldn't be, now be careful and don't tell them. I've already taught him. Buddy, go get him. Ride hard. Come on back. Give me some blood. So I put him on his bike, and then Jesus be with him. Jesus be with him. And he came back, and he was so excited. That was the coolest day of his life. We have to do that for our boys. Yes, we do it for our girls. Society is set up for girls to just fly and be incredible, but our boys are set up to not. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Okay, so safety has trumped growth. Now, you can interpret that any way you want, but that's what he says. We have been so afraid of our children. Porcelain doll again, people. Obesity now is one of the number one pediatric diagnosis. Obesity. Think about it. Driving along, watching kids walk out of school, obesity. It didn't used to be that way because our kids were out running and going and doing. They're not anymore. We got to keep, they're sitting at home. They have to stay inside. So I know I'm talking crazy, and I know this world is a scary world, and there's all sorts of crazy things, but we cannot live in fear. Obesity is the number one. Nearsightedness is another huge pediatric diagnosis anymore that did not used to be. They're getting nearsightedness from doing this all the time. Nearsighted. These children, depressed, a lot of depression. I think part of the depression is because that they have a desire inside of them to adventure, but they've been so overprotected that they can't. So, overprotected. Number 4, overserved. These are a very wanted generation. If you talk to the media and the advertising companies, they are targeting 15 to 25-year-olds. Number 1, because they have a lot of money and they have access to their parents' money. And parents nowadays don't say no. So these are one of the highest targeted media advertising, what would you call it, demographic? The 15 to 25-year-olds. They are overserved. They are so wanted. They are going after. They have their own TV shows. They have their own this. They have their own that. Everything is geared for the retail side of the 15 to 25-year-olds. So, and this has caused them, since they're so sought after, so watched over, it's caused them to become impatient, demanding, and self-centered. So here's the deal with the IY generation. Life is filled with toll booths. You go through life. You're young. You kind of pay your dues as a preschooler, and then you get to check into first grade, and you have to accomplish first grade, and you pay your dues, and then you check in and go to second grade, and at least that's how it used to be, and that's how it should be continued. But anyway, and you fulfill all the things, and then you get to graduate from high school, and then you fulfill. So you pay that toll booth, and you move on, and then you go to college, or you get your job, and you just kind of do these kinds of life moments, right? Well, what has happened is that we've developed in these kids, and they have chosen this as well, all of it works together, that the toll booths in life where they're supposed to pay and move on have become roadblocks, and they just stop there, okay? So what we're finding, as I talked about last night, that this IY generation is a postponed generation. They're very postponed. They've postponed growing up in a lot of ways. And adolescence, like I said, is stretched now into the mid to late 20s. And I find it very interesting. My 26-year-old son, my chemical engineer, he had a friend group, a fairly large friend group. And a lot of them went to college. They got out of high school. A lot of them went to college. They've all graduated now. And most of them went back to living at home. And which, I understand at this point in time, living at home in today's financial situation, sometimes you move, Jasmine and Ryan moved back in so that they could save money for their down payment so they could move into their house. Sometimes there's that moment. I moved back home while we were building our house, Dwayne and I, while we were building a house because, just kind of financial things, but it was a short-lived thing. We paid rent while we were there, half of the rent that we would have paid in a regular place. So there was value in it. I don't want to be too hard, but what these kids are doing is they're moving home and not getting jobs. They're not choosing to use their education, or when they came to graduation, they don't get jobs. They just stay at home. They remain a teenager past graduation. I want you to be aware of this. I want you to see it. Maybe you already have seen it, you know it, and you've watched it or whatever. But be very careful that when your children graduate from high school, that there is a milestone there and things change in your world towards them. But it's really kind of interesting. A lot of these kids that graduated with Caleb, and it's not just in his friend group, but it's broad. They got their 4-year degree, they move back home, and they don't work. I don't know if it's what I want to do. I'm waiting for the perfect job. So it's a very, very interesting thing that happens. It's entitlement. Yeah, it smacks of it, doesn't it?
Thanks for joining us today for this episode of the Joel Wolfe Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the message. Don't forget to subscribe to receive more great content regularly, and join Joel online at joelwolfe.me, as well as on Facebook at facebook.com/author Joel Wolfe. Also, don't miss Joel's latest book, guiding you through your adventures in parenting, Courage in Chaos, which Dr. Kevin Lehman says inspires both the heart and the head in equal measure. It's available for purchase at joelwolfe.me. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, have a great day.